먼저 오늘 저희들이 사실은 매년 이렇게 타운홀 미팅을 합니다. 주로 이런 여름에는 뉴저지에서 하고 중간이나 늦은 여름에는 뉴욕에서 1년에 2번 저희들이 타운홀 미팅을 합니다. 그래서 오늘은 저희들이 뉴욕에서 타운홀 미팅을 하고 또 연방 의원이라고 합니다. 사실 연방 의원들을 모시고 타운홀 미팅하는 게 쉽지는 않습니다. 근데 두 분 다 연락이 되었는데 뭐 아시다시피 오늘 갑자기 예기치 않았던 이런 폭우로 인해 갖고 지금 뉴욕 곳곳이 침수가 되어 있습니다. 그래서 갑자기 이렇게 하이브리드로 줌으로 의원님들이 들어오시는 상황이 발생을 했습니다. 그렇지만 저희들이 오늘 타운 미팅 하기로 했던 것은 다 진행을 하기로 했습니다. 저는 이 시민참여센터에서 올해로서 29년째 활동을 하고 있는 김동찬입니다. 반갑습니다. 오늘 저희 단체와 함께 코호스트를 해주신 각 단체 대표자분들께서 오셔서 같이 한마디씩 인사 말씀을 하도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 오늘 사회를 보게 된 우리 시민참여센터의 리처드 인 사무국장입니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 정말 우리가 몇 개월 전에 트럼프 정부가 출범하면서 너무나 예상치 않은 우리 이민자 커뮤니티에게는 여러 가지 놀랄 만한 일들이 발생하고 있었습니다. 그래서 특히 우리 같은 소수민족인 한인 사회가 좀 여러 가지로 어려움에 처하고 있는 가운데 저번에 한인회에서 첫 번째는 7개 우리 봉사단체가, 그 다음에는 한 20개 우리 단체들이 모여서 정말 이 커뮤니티 문제를 논의를 했습니다. 뭐 아시다시피 소료미비자 우리 한인분들, 또 여러 가지 소외계층분들, 그런 분들을 우리가 정말 보호해야 되는 가운데 오늘같이 이렇게 두 연방 하원의원을 모시고 처음으로 이렇게 연방 차원에서 우리의 어려운 문제들, 또 이민자 커뮤니티가 처한 그런 여러 가지 상황을 솔직하게 의견도 제시하고 호소할 수 있는 좋은 기회가 됐다는 면에서 참 감사드리고, 오늘 같은 행사를 잘 주관해 주신 우리 시민참여센터와 우리 김동찬 대표에게 감사를 드립니다.
안녕하세요. 저는 뉴욕 가정 상담소의 이지혜라고 합니다. 그래서 오늘 제가 항상 이렇게 나와서 얘기를 하는데, 지금 우리 차세대 리더십을 더 이렇게 디벨롭해야 하는 게 되게 중요한 일이잖아요. 그래서 저희 지금 인턴으로 와서 정말 많은 고생을 하고 있는 우리 가인 인턴님께서 우리 소개를 해 주실 겁니다.
네. 안녕하세요. 저 뉴욕 가정 상담소 인턴 이가인입니다. 뉴욕 가정 상담소는 가정폭력, 성폭력을 예방하려고 돕는 일을 하고 있는 단체이고요. 이렇게 좀 이런 타운홀 같은 데는 정말 중요하고요. 또 저희 직원들도 같이 오셨고, 네. 이렇게 함께 모일 수 있어서 정말 영광입니다. 네.
감사합니다.
안녕하세요. 김은경입니다. 이렇게 비가 와서 아까 정말 진짜 할 수 있을까 그랬는데 이렇게 많이 모여주셔서 정말 감사해요. 처음에 저희들이 준비 모임을 했을 때 굉장히 적게 약간 이렇게 라운드 테이블처럼 이렇게 할 생각을 했었다가, 저희가 요즘에 좀 세태도 세태인지라, 그리고 또 이 두 분의 그 정치인들이 저희 한인 사회에 굉장히 많이 인버브를 하기를 원해서 요즘에 좀 많이 뜸해지셨어요. 그레이스 맹 위원이 그 저희 한인 사회에 나타나는 일들이 많이 줄어들었었습니다. 그래서 어떻게 하면은 이제 저희가 어차피 똑같은 얘기를 하지만 그래도 많은 분들이 모이셔서 우리 한인들이 굉장히 관심이 있습니다. 당신이 하는 일에. 그래서 우리를 위해서 좀 힘 좀 써주십시오라고 하는 것이 우리들의 이게 나와 있는 얼굴들과 이 시트라고 생각이 들어서 저희들이 좀 많이 노력을 해서 이렇게 보시다시피 코호스트가 되게 많아졌잖아요. 그래서 너무너무 감사합니다. 저희 YWCA 멤버들이 이렇게 못 오셨는데 일어나 주실래요, 다? 감사합니다. 네, 저희 YWCA, 퀸즈 YWCA는 지금 세 군데에 있고요. 그 파슨스에서가 저희가 메인 빌딩인데 거기에서 저희들이 주로 많이 하는 일들은 아시다시피 교육이 굉장히 많이 있습니다. 그래서 어린이 애프터 스쿨부터 그리고 어른들 그 시니어 그 에듀케이션까지 그리고 ESL 그리고 또 뭐가 있죠? 많아요. 저희 웹사이트 한번 들어와 봐 주세요. 그래서 저희 시니어 프로그램이 그 파슨스에 있고 유니언에 있습니다. 그래서 한 40여 개의 프로그램이 이렇게 운행이 되어 있어서 관심 있으신 분들 많이 도와주시고 특별히 젊은 여성들의 인볼브먼트가 되게 필요합니다. 여성들이 오셔서 자신의 재능도 좀 이렇게 나눠주시고 봉사도 함께 해주시고 지금 저희 멤버들이시지만 더 멤버들이 또 다 봉사자세요. 그래서 이 봉사자들이 굉장히 열심히 노력을 하고 있고 지금 나온 김에 8월 23일 날 저희들이 Back to School 그 이벤트를 하면서 어린이들에게 이제 학용품을 나눠주면서 러게지 마켓을 합니다. 청소년들이 자기가 집에서 팔고 싶은 거를 러게지에 싸갖고 와서 파는 거예요. 그래서 그 세터데이 할 예정이니까 혹시 주위에 알고 계신 젊은이들 중에 나 좀 장사 좀 하고 싶어 하시는 그 청소년들이 있다면 많이 추천해 주셔서 많이 올 수 있으면 좋겠습니다. 특별히 YWCA도 많이 사랑해 주시고 좀 관심 좀 가져주세요. 지금 여러 가지로 이 정치적인 것과 사회적인 것 때문에 non-profit이 많이 힘들어지고 있습니다. 저희도 거의 매일 뉴스만 보고 그게 가장 첫 번째 하는 일이 돼버려서 저희들이 하나로 뭉쳐서 우리를 위해서 대변해주는 그러한 정치인들에게 또 힘을 실어주고 그들도 저희들의 말을 제대로 국회에다가 알려줄 수 있으면 참 좋겠습니다. 힘 실어주시면 좋겠습니다. 감사합니다.
저는 KCS 뉴욕 한인봉사센터 에이징 서비스의 매니징 디렉터로 있는 헬레나 관장입니다. 이렇게 호우주의보임에도 불구하고 커뮤니티에 관심을 가지고 이렇게 모두 참석해 주셔서 감사드리고 남녀노소를 막론하고 커뮤니티의 힘을 키우자면 유권자 등록이 되게 중요한데 굉장히 오랜 세월 동안 케이스 시민참여센터가 한인 커뮤니티의 위상을 높이고자 유권자 운동을 열심히 해주셨고 그래서 이 자리를 빌어서 다시 감사드리고요. 또한 한인 커뮤니티의 모든 단체장 모든 분들께서 이런 귀한 시간에 함께 모여서 저희의 목소리를 이렇게 컨그레스맨 두 분을 모시고 이런 자리에서 이제 어드레스 해주려고 오셔서 정말 뜻깊은 자리라고 생각합니다.
안녕하십니까. 저는 뉴욕 지역단체연합회 의장으로 있는 이에스더입니다. 오늘은 연방하원들을 모시고 커뮤니티 이렇게 행사를 타운홀이 경비도 많이 들지만 이렇게 감리교에서 이렇게 제공해 주셔서 이런 행사를 하게 돼서 대단히 기쁘게 생각합니다.
안녕하세요. 제가 시다라 그러면 많은 분이 모르실 수도 있는데요. 저희의 그 풀 이름이 Community Inclusion and Development Alliance. 한국 이름이 저희가 특별 읽지는 않아서 한인 장애가족 지원센터라고 하고 약자로 CIDA, CIDA, CIDA라고 부르는 기관이에요. 저희가 생긴지는 그룹으로 있은지는 20년이 되었지만 지금 저희가 비영리가 된지는 거의 한 9년째 되는 그런 곳이에요. 저희는 장애를 가진 사람들과 또 장애를 가진 자녀의 부모님들을 지원하는 지원센터인데요. 저희는 8년 전에 연방정부 교육부 밑에서 50개 중에서 유일하게 한인을 베이스로 해서 저희가 부모님들에 대한 지원 그리고 학교 특수교육이 굉장히 복잡한 관계로 부모님들을 위해서 학교에 가서 여러 가지 권리옹호를 활동을 하고 또 우리 청년들이 이 학교를 졸업하고 나면은 취업을 할 수 있게 도와주는 역할을 하는 50개 중에서 한인 베이스로 하는 곳의 유일한 곳이에요. 오늘 우리 의원님들한테 말씀드릴 내용은 저희 같은 페어센터가 지금 50개 주에 95개가 있는데 지금 펀딩이 지로아웃이 됐기 때문에 그 문제에 대해서 말씀을 드릴 거고요. 연방정부 기금으로 하는 프로그램 이외에 저희가 많은 분들의 성금으로 또 다른 기금 소스로 해서 하는 장애 청년 취업 프로그램도 있고 또 부모님들이 성인 자녀를 가진 부모님들을 위한 그런 부모님들 지원하는 프로그램들도 있어요. 그래서 여러분들 주위에 장애 자녀를 가진 부모님들이 일을 어떻게 했으면 좋겠는지 모르겠다 하시는 분들이 있으면 저희들에게 연락을 해주시면 저희가 정성껏 도와드리도록 하겠습니다. 저희 오늘 몇 분 스태프들이 나오시긴 했는데요. 우리 정유정 선생님이 한인 가족 지원 프로그램 담당을 하시는 분이시기 때문에 이분을 하시면 되고요. 케일라 이분은 지금 이제 여러 가지 디벨롭먼트 이제 개발을 하시는 분이시고 유통 이분은 이제 중국 커뮤니티에서 오신 분이신데 또 저희가 중국 커뮤니티가 저희가 여러분들이 코올리션을 해서 한 1000여 분이 또 저와 도움을 드리고 있어요. 그래서 여러분들 저희가 여러분들을 많이 도와드리고요. 또 저희가 이 문제에 대해서 발표를 할 때 많이 좀 호응을 해주셨으면 감사하겠습니다.
김성월이라고 합니다. 해마다 지금 보면 우리가 지금 타운홀 미팅을 하는데 올해는 또 아다시피 연방 위원들이 또 오셔가지고 우리 지역 사회에 대해서 여러 가지 그거에 대해서 미팅하는데 진짜 우리 반갑습니다, 여러분. 저도 오늘에 온 건 다른 게 아니고 우리 조선족 동포분들이 진짜 올해는 좀 정말 어떻게 보면 힘들게 보내고 있거든요. 그래서 오늘 이 장소에서 우리 그 연방 의원들이 혹시나 무슨 질문이나 의견 같은 걸 제기하고 하려고 이 장소에 왔습니다.
네, 여러분들 반갑습니다. 저희는 지난해 9월 29일 날에 처음으로 창립된 뉴욕 조선족 동포 봉사센터 주광일 회장입니다. 여러분 반갑습니다. 감사합니다. 현재 뉴욕 일본으로 우리 전족 동포분들 한 4만 명이 됩니다. 4만 명 되는데 지금까지 문화 차이, 그다음에 역사 차이 때문에 그 한인 사회하고 많이 동떨어져가 있는데 점차적으로 지금 우리 같은 민족입니다. 코리안하고 한국에서 온 민족도 우리 코리안 같은 민족이고 중국 만주 땅 간도에서 온 우리 동포들도 같은 민족입니다. 그래서 아무튼 우리 이민사에서 함께 손잡고 미국 주류사회 진출을 위해서 우리가 열심히 함께 분투합시다. 힘 합쳐 함께 분투합시다. 감사합니다.
반갑습니다. 에스다 재단 사무총장 현미숙입니다. 우리가 헬프라인 봉사자들만 52명이 계신데 오늘 다 모시고 올 걸 그랬어요. 이렇게 많이 오신 거 보니까 오늘 이 훌륭한 장소를 제공해 주신 후러싱제일교회의 장로님이기도 하신 하용아 회장님께서 저희 에스다 재단의 파운더이시고요. 이 에스다 재단은 사실 한 가족의 불행한 사건으로 인해서 이렇게 만들어지게 된 단체입니다. 에스더 하라는 정말 보스턴 칼리지를 다녔던 아름답고 아주 총명했던 아가씨가 우울증을 견디지 못해서 자살을 함으로써 만들어진 단체입니다. 이 단체에서 정말 우리 하용아 회장님께서 나와 같은 그 불행한 아버지가 더 이상 우리 한인 사회에 있어서는 안 되겠다라는 그런 생각으로 우리 이 재단을 만들게 되었고요. 그래서 저희 에스다 재단은 더 건강한 정신의 한인 사회를 만들기 위해서 2014년 1월부터 현재 지금 11년째입니다만은 저희들이 하고 있는 모든 프로그램 24시간 헬프라인, 우울증과 불안증과 여러 가지 정신적인 문제를 상담해주는 밤 1시, 2시도 괜찮습니다. 이 헬프라인을 하고 있고요. 그리고 멘탈 헬스 퍼스트 에이드라고 남을 어떻게 도울 것인가 제대로 잘 도와야 되거든. 특히 요즘 정신적인 문제가 굉장히 사회적 이슈로 되고 있는 이때 어떻게 도울 것인가에 대해서 배우는데 지금 저희들이 48회째 하고 있으면서 1000명 이상의 멘탈리스 퍼스트 에이더들을 배출해서 미 정부로부터 이렇게 이수증을 받는 프로그램을 실시하고 있습니다. 그리고 라디오 방송에서 계속 나가서 멘탈리스 퍼스트 어웨어런스를 하고 있고요. 그리고 정신건강 세미나나 매거진 같은 것을 지속적으로 해서 다른 것이 아닌 더 건강한 정신의 한인 사회를 만들기 위한 정신건강 프로그램에 포커스를 맞추고 있습니다. 여러분께서 좀 더 많은 참여와 협력을 해주셔서 어떻게 보면은 정신건강 포커스하는 유일한 단체일 수 있습니다. 여러분께서 많이 힘 보태주시고요. 그리고 정말 빚도 없이 그냥 그늘에서 이렇게 여러분들이 훌륭한 사회를 만들기 위해서 노력하시는 우리 NGO 단체 우리 장님들 그리고 여러 참가자들 분께 정말 존경의 말씀을 드리고 싶습니다. 감사합니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 조선족 동포 경제인 협회 회장 미나리입니다. 오늘 시민단체, 시민인권단체에서 주최하는 이런 미팅에 참가하게 돼서 참으로 영광이라고 생각합니다. 저희 협회는 조선족 동포들의 비즈니스하는 어떤 그런 분들이 함께 모여서 비즈니스의 어떤 그런 정보를 공유하고 그리고 함께 또 비즈니스를 같이 하는 그런 아이디어도 구상하면서 이렇게 너무너무 창립한 지는 얼마 안 됐지만 원래회를 통해서 다들 너무 만족하고 회원들이 계속 들어오고 있습니다. 앞으로 지켜봐 주시고 여러분들의 응원 부탁드립니다. 감사합니다.
네, 안녕하십니까. 노인 상조회 회장 임기영입니다. 저도 우리 노인 상조회도 미약하나마 이렇게 하는 데는 좀 협조하고 많이 도와드리겠습니다. 여러분 감사합니다. 네.
우리 한인 동포들이 꼬다닌 보르자리가 아니고 그다음에 보이지 않는 그런 커뮤니티가 아니고 목소리를 내는 그런 커뮤니티로 지역의 정치인들에게 인식되게 하기 위해서는 별일 없는 것 가지고도 계속 이런 미팅을 하는 것이 필요합니다. 더군다나 요 근래에 들어서 이런 행사에 이렇게 많은 단체들이 서로 힘을 모아서 함께 이런 행사를 하는 것은 좀 보기 드문 일이라고 생각을 합니다. 그렇지만 이럴 때 참가하는 우리 정치인들이 한인 커뮤니티의 어떤 단결된 목소리들을 이해할 수 있기 때문에 앞으로도 지속적으로 해나가고 다음에는 모든 한인 동포 단체들이 우리 중국 동포 단체 심지어는 우리 중앙아시아에서 온 동포 단체들까지도 함께 할 수 있는 그날을 기약해 보겠습니다.
우리 한미장학재단이 다카나 그 불체자들도 돕는다는 거 말씀 하나 드리고 가겠어요. 1969년에 워싱턴 DC 쪽에 생겼으니까 유학생 중심으로 한 56, 7년이 됐거든요. 그래서 지금 인다우먼트 펀드라고 돈이 모여 있는 게 한 650만 불 되고 그 금년서부터 특히 매년 3,000불씩을 드려요. 학생들에게. 동북부 지부라고 해서 제가 속해 있는 뉴욕서부터 버먼트까지 80명에게 3,000불을 주는 거죠. 고등학생들은 상징적으로 500불을 주고 11학년, 12학년 올라가는 학생들 또 하나 사변 중에 6.25 사변에 참전했던 미국 사람, 그건 꼭 미국 분이라야 돼요. 미국 분들의 자녀들 Korean War Veterans Descendant 장학금이 있어요. 그걸 하면서 저희들이 기쁜 거는 저희들이 38,000명의 미군이 죽지 않았으면 여기 있을 수가 없는데 부산에 우리가 다 쫓겨나갔었잖아요. 근데 그분들이 희생함으로 인해서 우리가 이렇게 이 좋은 나라 와 있는데 그 자녀들에게 장학금을 줄 수 있다는 것은 저희들의 큰 기쁨이고 또한 좋은 외교가 아닐까도 싶어요. 입양아들을 우리들은 굉장히 신경을 씁니다. 입양아들이나 입양아 자녀들 저희들이 못했을 일을 미국 부모님들이 특히 스페셜 니즈가 있는 오늘도 귀한 재단에서 이렇게 오셔서 말씀하셨는데 그 스페셜 니즈가 있는 아이들을 자기들의 기쁨이라고 그러면서 또 한국에서 데리고 온 미국 부모님들 존경이 가죠. 그래서 오늘 말씀 앞에서 많이 하신 것처럼 이렇게 여러 그 단체들이 합심해서 이렇게 하신다는 게 우리 시민참여센터의 우리 김 대표님 워낙 덕이 있으시고 폭이 넓으시고 검도 사단의 무술과 문물을 겸비하신 분, 그런 참 멋있는 분이 이렇게 하니까 또 다들 적이 없으시대요. 다들 이렇게 감싸 안고, 리더가 그래야죠, 그죠? 모지면 안 되죠. 감사합니다.
예, 제1계 김정호 목사입니다. 반갑습니다. 감사합니다. 아마 요즘에 가장 큰 피해를 본 지역은 뉴욕에서도 퀸즈 지역입니다. 그레이스 맹 위원이 거의 다 이 지역이고 또 탐 수오지는 파트인데 저희에게 교인들이 크게 지금 어려움을 당하고 있습니다. 권사님 누구 뽑으셨어요? 그러면 누구 뽑았대요? 이럴 줄 알았으면 그렇게 안 뽑았습니다. 그래요. 국회의원을 누굴 뽑고 대통령을 누구 뽑느냐가 지금은 살고 죽느냐의 어려움에 기해 있습니다. 돈 많은 사람들에게는 아무 문제가 없지만 돈 없는 사람에게는 생존에 관한 어려움을 지금 겪고 있습니다. 이렇게까지 투표하고 정치에 참여하는 게 중요한 거를 아마 예전에 진짜 몰랐던 것 같습니다. 정말 이번에 이런 귀한 모임을 통해서 우리 코리안 커뮤니티가 단합하고 자각하고 정말 정치 참여에 대통령만이 아니라 국회의원, 시의원, 주의원을 누구 뽑느냐에 대해서 정말 이게 정신 차리지 않으면 우리 생존의 문제이고 우리 교인들의 생존의 문제는 저의 생존의 문제이기도 합니다. 지금도 교회들 보면 좋은 동네 서버브에는 교회들이 헌금이 더 많이 들어옵니다. 뉴욕의 퀸즈 같은 데 교회들은 아주 어려움을 당하고 있습니다. 그래서 바라기는 우리 가장 큰 피해를 보고 있는 지역의 그레이스 맹 위원 또 우리 탐 수오지 위원 이분들이 오늘 이 미팅을 통해서 때로는 국회의원들이 바닥에 살아가는 사람들의 생존에 대해서 모릅니다. 이것의 절실한 아픔들을 얘기해주고 우리 코리안 커뮤니티가 더 이상 방심하거나 쉽게 생각하고 쓸데없는 문제 가지고 티격태격 쌈박질할 때가 아니라 진짜 우리 커뮤니티의 미래를 위해서 여러분 오늘 참 중요한 회의에 중요한 얘기들 잘 말씀해 주시고 단결해서 이 문제를 타결해 나가시길 바랍니다. 환영하고 감사합니다.
Okay, good evening. Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Richard In. I am the Executive Director for Korean American Civic Empowerment. And as we can see on the screen, let's welcome Congresswoman Grace Meng. Congresswoman Grace Meng represents New York 6 and sits on the House Appropriations Committee and chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus.
Sure. Thanks so much, Richard. Thank you to Muksanim and everyone for hosting this important town hall. I'm honored to be here with my friend and colleague, Congressman Tom Suozzi, to have this discussion with you. Thank you for accommodating us tonight. Tom and my districts were hit very hard with the rain and the flooding. We actually have about 100 people stuck on a train in Bayside, and there are people stuck on the highways from the Clearview to the Cross Island. So we've been monitoring some of that and helping out. But it's an honor to be here with you. I'm proud to represent a significant Korean American community in Washington, D.C., and look forward to our conversation tonight.
Also joining us this evening is Congressman Tom Suozzi from New York District 3. Congressman Suozzi sits on the Committee on Ways and Means and also is on the Congressional Caucus on Korea and the Caucus for the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, among many others. Welcome, Congressman.
감사합니다. 안녕하세요. I'm very happy to be with all of you, and I'm sorry that we can't be there in person. I can't believe the photographs I've seen of the different flooding that's taking place. This is a very important meeting, and I'm so glad that my friends were able to help set up a Zoom that we could hear to you remotely. So thank you very much. I'm happy to join my colleague, Grace Meng, who's got a very important position on the House Appropriations Committee. I want to congratulate her on that important position. Grace, 합니다.
So let's get right into the pre-selected questions. Everyone should have already had one of these booklets. If you don't, you can request one from our lovely interns over there. So we'll go into the first one, and this question comes from CIDA, Community Inclusion and Development Alliance. So you guys, everyone here can, feel free to read the background. We're gonna, for the sake of time, we're gonna go straight into the question aspect, assuming that everyone has read this in preparation. Now, when it comes to this particular issue in the IDEA Part D funding, how can you help ensure that parent centers like CIDA continue to receive direct federal funding under IDEA Part D, and what strategies do you recommend to restore and safeguard this critical support for families?
I'll start off with a little bit. I want to thank organizations like CIDA, which operate, I think, right on the border of my district and Congressman Suozzi's. I've met the doctor before and am really appreciative of the great work that she does in helping to serve our community. People who often don't have anyone to represent their interests. And education, as you all know, and agree, is really important to our Korean American community. I'm a member of the House Appropriations Committee, as was mentioned before, and I've worked every budget year to support full funding of programs like IDEA that serve our most vulnerable kids, but not just the kids, but also their families and their community. And look, when the president proposes a budget, that's all it is. It is a proposal. And Congress has a constitutional duty and the right to be able to negotiate through committees like our Appropriations Committee. So we are in that process now. We can decide that we like the president's numbers and his proposals, or we don't like them. And we can work on making sure that we have the most robust amount of funding.
So a lot of that funding comes through IDEA, which stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's what IDEA is, and this is from Part D. And, I've always co-sponsored, I'm sure Grace has always co-sponsored the idea of trying to fully fund that. But right now we see this administration is cutting a lot of important programs, especially related to education at the federal level. We need the Democrats and the Republicans to work together on this. I'm the co-chair of a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus. I'm the Democratic co-chair and there's a Republican co-chair. And it's 50 members of Congress, pretty evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans. And we try to work together to find common ground to try and figure out how to do programs that we think are important to the American people. I think this is an example of a program like that. The challenge in this current environment is that everything is so toxic, with everybody just, yelling and screaming at each other instead of working together. So I don't like some of the cuts that have been proposed by this administration, especially in the education area. We're going to work in the Congress, in the House, and hopefully the Senate as well. As a matter of fact, I think the Senate is doing a better job than the House is right now to try and get some of these budget bills done that fund important programs like this, because there is a lot of bipartisan support for things like IDEA. So we just have to move beyond some of the toxicity and work on focusing on the important programs for things like the IDEA Part D. So I don't know if that's a good enough answer for you guys, but we support these. I support these programs. I know Grace supports these programs. We just have to figure out how we can persuade our colleagues not to let this get cut along with the other cuts that are taking place. And the money will they're going to try and send it back to the states in a block grant. And we need to advocate to the state of New York, if they get the money, that they continue to fund programs like CIDA.
All right, thank you, Congress members. The Korean American Family Services Center, KAFSC, is the question about the OVW funding. OVW stands for the Office on Violence Against Women. So what actions are being taken to ensure that OVW funding remains protected and robust so that organizations like KAFSC can continue to meet the urgent and unique needs of immigrant survivors, especially in this time of heightened uncertainty?
I can start. First, I want to give a shout out to Jihei Fisher because yesterday on NPR Public Radio, I got to hear Jihei talk about the important work and the important cultural appropriate services that groups like KAFSC provides. And I was really proud to hear about that, especially on national public radio. I do sit on the subcommittee that determines the Department of Justice budget, which this grant and funding falls under. I'm the highest ranking Democrat, so we work or try to work closely with the chairman. Every year that I have been on the subcommittee, I have advocated for the highest levels of funding for this office and this program. Now, one thing that is troubling for this year, and Tom is right that the Senate actually did better than what the House is trying to propose, is that within this OVW account, there are something called culturally specific programs. And this program was completely eliminated by the House Republicans. It's still in there on the Senate side, so we're hoping to be able to negotiate and make sure that that money stays in there.
So these are very, very sophisticated questions that you're asking, and it's important that people understand what's going on right now in the Congress. So in the United States Constitution, it's up to the House of Representatives and the United States Senate to has the power of the purse. We decide what's going to happen as far as the funding. So there's three branches of government. There's the executive branch, that's the president and all the departments. Then it's the legislative branch, which is the House and the Senate. And then it's the judicial branch. And we're all equal. We're not one's not more powerful than the other. Under this administration right now, they're trying to make it that the executive branch has all the power and that the Congress is not as important as it's been historically, especially in the area of the power of the purse. You know, what happens with the money? And so what's happened is we pass a budget, and this administration, the executive branch, the president and his staff, is saying, oh, you passed a budget through the Congress and the Senate, but we don't want to fund all the things that you said we should fund. We're not going to spend the money the way you said that we should spend the money. And in the specific example of this program, which is the Korean American Family Service Center, which does this important work, this comes under the Attorney General of the United States of America. And Pam Bondi, who is the Attorney General, is decreasing the funding and not spending the money the way it's supposed to be spent. And they're proposing in the budget from the president, proposing a budget to the House and Senate that we spend 30% less than we've spent in the previous years. So dramatically less funding than historically. So just this past, I think this week, Senator Collins asked Pam Bondi in a hearing, she said, you know, why are these funding levels being decreased when the office provides such important vital services that you, of course, know about? And she said, quote, I hope we can work together to get to a better place on the budget, because I'm convinced from talking with advocacy groups and with survivors themselves, we need to do more. So Grace and I have always supported the Violence Against Women's Act. We supported the previous administration's increase in the funding that they did, and we're against the idea of cutting this funding dramatically. So we need to just keep on really fighting for this. Grace and I were both on a bipartisan letter to Pam Bondi earlier this year saying that they should not withdraw the 2025 funding opportunities, which is awful. So, you know, there's about a dozen Republicans that support the Democrats or support this the Violence Against Women's Act, but there's only 12 of them out of over 200. So we need to try and get more of them to help us to move forward. But we're going to keep on fighting because this is a very important program. But this is kind of like the big picture stuff that's happening that you see on the news at night. This administration is cutting some of the most important programs at the same time that they're giving tax breaks to some of the wealthiest people in the country. At the same time, they're blowing the biggest hole in the deficit we've ever had in the history of the country. And one of the programs that's being proposed to be cut is the program that funds a program like the Korean American Family Service Center that provides services to women that are subject to violence. So we're going to keep on fighting against this.
This next question comes from KCS, Korean Community Services of Metropolitan New York, on the topic of Senior Community Service Employment Program. So this question, it comes in three parts. It has to do with our older adults, into their retirement and through dignity of, working and, contributing to their communities. What job creation plans exist for vulnerable seniors? The second part is, how will nonprofits fill staffing gaps without support? And third, what is the federal response to the collapse of essential community programs?
Well, first I want to thank KCS for providing so many services to our community. And of course, our seniors, not only do they do a lot to help our community contribute and even help our younger generations, our future leaders, they were part of this tremendous program that has been around for decades. It's a great program. It traditionally is already underfunded. The president talks a lot about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. And it's a shame that he's trying to cut programs like this that our senior citizens depend on, but also allow them to be the awesome contributing citizens that they are through programs like this. The president unilaterally froze this funding for programs like this, preventing nonprofits all across New York and around the country from accessing the money that they already earned. He's not allowed to just do that, and there are lawsuits going on. But unfortunately, our nonprofits have really taken a hit. And I know many of you have reached out to our offices from the very beginning because of the fact that you knew that you, and more importantly, your members and the people that you serve would be impacted. This is something like Congressman Suozzi said, this money wasn't just something that, Congress decided, that me and Tom decided KCS should get. This is money that Republicans and Democrats came together last year. We put together a bill, we voted on it. It is law. And we said, hey, programs like the ones that KCS operates under they are legal. They are laws that we voted for. So it is a tough time. We are still working to try to get back some of the funding. Sometimes it has worked and sometimes it has not. But we appreciate all of you, and we know it's very important.
Again, these are very detailed questions. I'm not used to getting detailed questions like this from large groups of people. So I really want to commend the folks who are working on these type of questions because they're very excellent questions. We should be encouraging people who want to work. And, there's a lot of senior citizens that want to work, some that have to work. They need to work. They need the money in order to pay the expensive bills that it costs to live in New York. So they need to work. And this program at the Senior Community Service Employment Program helps seniors to match with employers who want to hire them. This program funding is an example of government helping not-for-profits to do something to make people's lives better. And it's actually a good use of government money because the more self-sufficient seniors are, the less programs they need, the better their lives are. And this has proven to be a very effective program. Unfortunately, the philosophy of the executive branch right now is that government's no good. It doesn't do a good job. We don't want to do anything. It's all full of waste, fraud, and abuse. And instead of looking at things specifically, they've kind of done things kind of with a broad brush. So I don't know if you followed the whole thing with when they had the Doge with Elon Musk and they wanted to cut things. And I'm all for going after waste, fraud, and abuse. We have to go after waste, fraud, and abuse. But what they cut the people that oversee the nuclear stockpile. And they said, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. We gotta keep those people who oversee the nuclear stockpile. They cut the people that oversaw the measles outbreak that was taking place down in the Southwest and a tuberculosis outbreak somewhere. I mean, and they said, oh, we made a mistake. We got to put those people back. And they're trying to cut an important program that helps seniors to find employment. And that's a good program. And it's not an example of waste, fraud, and abuse. It's an example of helping a population that actually incentivizes employers to hire people that are underemployed. And seniors are an example of a population that are underemployed, and they need a little help to be matched with people who need those jobs. There's a bill I'm on called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. We'll give a tax credit to an employer who hires a population that's not normally hired. So to incentivize the employer to say, oh, I can pay this person and I can actually save money on my taxes by hiring people that aren't normally employed. Seniors are an example of underemployed employees. So I think this is a good program. It's part of this bigger battle that's taking place that most people don't get into the details like you're getting into, which is this whole debate between what's the role of the executive branch versus the legislative branch. And so much of what we see in the newspapers and on television and on social media is just this angry yelling and screaming instead of getting down into the details and the facts. And this is an example of a program that if you look at the details and the facts, you find out, oh, this is a good program. We should keep this kind of thing. So I know that Grace is with me 100% on this, and we're going to continue to fight for these type of programs. But quite frankly, this is just one example of many, many programs that are getting cut like this. And it's going to be a big fight. And what happens in the 2026 elections are going to make a big impact on this. But keep on fighting, keep on doing what you do. We need you to keep on fighting for the programs that you care about.
Thank you, Congress members. Next up, we have a question from our own college interns over at Korean American Civic Empowerment. They've been doing a lot of research this summer, and this was the one that really piqued their interest. It has to do with our medical practices and how we afford medical care in this country. So the topic summarizes the challenges posed by medical insurance companies and their impact on small medical practices. So it seems it's a two-part question. So the first one is to address the structural issues that lead healthcare providers to avoid insurance-covered services. Would you consider legislation to enhance accountability and transparency in the insurance industry? And the following question for part two is, would you support the establishment of a federal level dispute mediation body between insurance companies and medical providers to protect doctors and small healthcare practices?
Well, these are super specific questions. I will be honest, I don't know a lot about this topic, but more transparency to provide more affordable access to healthcare is always a good thing. It just feels like it's getting more and more complicated and more every day straying away from the most important goal of actually providing affordable healthcare for people. So I would love to work with our young experts on this issue. Would love to support legislation that would make the process more transparent and whatever type of potential mediation or arbitrator could be helpful in the process to protect both our healthcare practitioners who are essentially small business owners especially here in Queens and New York City, and to help them deal with one of the Goliaths of their industry, the insurance companies.
Yeah, so I just was at a hearing last week or a couple of weeks ago in the Ways and Means Committee about Medicare Advantage. And there was a lot of testimony about insurance companies that, number one, give a big hassle to patients and to doctors, providers, for what they call prior authorization. And it takes forever to get prior authorization. You jump through a lot of hoops and make it very difficult. And then the insurance companies, when they apply for money from Medicaid or Medicare, which are two of the biggest funders of health insurance in America, they do what's called upcoding. They make it seem like the patient is sicker and they need more tests and more this so that they can get higher reimbursement. And it's very complicated. Nobody really has a good answer to solve the healthcare problem in our country. We know there's a problem. We spend more than any other country in the world. Our life expectancy is going down. We have a higher infant mortality rate than a lot of other countries, and we're not getting the good results that we should be getting. If you have a good hospital, a good doctors, you're lucky, and good insurance, you're lucky. But if you don't, you're in a lot of trouble. So we got a big problem in our country. But there's nobody's laid out like this is a good answer to how to fix it. As far as an independent body, I actually proposed and implemented, I helped pass a law called the No Surprises Act, which required independent dispute resolution, which said that if you show up at a doctor for like an emergency room, or you show up at a doctor that you have to go see, and then you're not in the plan that doctor carries, you're out of network. Well, then the decision about how much gets paid by the insurance company to the doctor or to the hospital is subject to an independent dispute resolution. So it was great. It was a big fight. It was a big deal for us to get this law. It was designed to protect the patients so they didn't get hit with a bill that they didn't expect to come. And we had a fight to protect the doctors and the hospitals that they didn't get taken advantage of by the insurance companies. The problem is that the insurance companies were then abusing the independent dispute resolution process. So I sent a letter to the then Secretary of Health and Human Services and to the insurance companies and said, hey, we're watching what you're doing. You got to stop monkeying around with this. So it started to get a little bit better, but it's really a major battle. And a lot of these big companies, like United and Cigna and even CVS and CVS Health and Anthem and Empire Blue Cross, they're kind of like gaming the system a little bit. So we are trying to just pay attention. But again, this is a very complicated area, and we're fighting to try and get people to pay attention to it. And again, in this current environment, everybody wants to keep things simple and yelling and screaming instead of talking about the details. So this is a very complicated area of the law, but I mean, it comes down to some of the basic things that people like Grace and I are fighting for the little guy, and some of our opponents are fighting for the big guys. So that's what it comes down to in simple terms.
All right, thank you, Congressman. The Minkwon for Community Action, and this topic is on immigration. And so, it's a hot topic these days. There's a lot going on. We hear a lot of stuff on the news. There's some things pertaining to the Korean community as well that we keep hearing about. So questions, this is also a two-parter. Number one, do you have any plans at the congressional level to rein in the current widespread and intense immigration enforcement practices? And the second part is, in particular, how do you think vulnerable immigrant communities should be protected under the current immigration system?
Well, thank you for that question. This is an issue that it has and is impacting the Asian American and the Korean American community as well. You may have heard of some of the more high-profile cases of immigrants who have been detained, immigrants who have literally served our country. One of them is a U.S. Army veteran, for example, and was allowed to stay in the U.S. As long as he followed the law and checked in with ICE annually. He's the one, Mr. Park, that self-deported. So you've heard a lot about some of the more high-profile cases like this. It has been really hard, not just for Democrats, but even Republican offices to get more information from the administration, for example, from Department of Homeland Security, when these folks are being detained and or deported, we are trying to get more information. We deserve to have oversight, and we need that process to be more consistent, as it always has, whether the administration is Republican or Democrat. Something that we have been working towards is to get more transparency from the Department of Homeland Security. We want reports of people who are being detained and deported, especially if they're American citizens and green card holders. Recently, I introduced a piece of legislation to try to rein in and to make more fair the process of law enforcement and detention practices. You know, in America, law enforcement officers of all sorts wear badges and they have ID numbers. Everyone from the NYPD to IRS agents to FBI agents, they all wear badges with an identification and sometimes a name. So all my bill does is to ask that ICE officers also wear that same type of badge, because we want to make sure that they are being identified. This not only protects the people who are being detained, because you don't know if someone is actually a law enforcement officer, or it could just be a bad guy trying to kidnap you in front of your family. So all we're asking is to have the same standard that other law enforcement officers have with my recent piece of legislation.
This is my number one issue in Congress. This is the thing I'm focused on the most right now. My father was born in Italy, came to the United States as a young boy, lived a great American success story. When I think of America and the American dream, I think of the immigrant story. That's why I've got such a good relationship with the Korean American community, for example. I see my family story in your family story. It's the exact same thing. Hard work, education, family, just trying to move your family ahead and your community ahead. And, we all saw the people streaming over the border last year in the campaign and on television, and nobody liked that. Anybody who said that's okay, doesn't know what they're talking about. So the president has done a good job to secure the border, and we support the idea of deporting violent criminals. But now it's getting out of control. I just did a press conference today. If you go on my social media, you can see it, where I was talking about TPS recipients, temporary protective status. There's 1 million people in America that have been here for over 25 years because they had an earthquake or a flood or a war in their own country. And we said, you can live here in America. And they've been paying taxes, and they've been working, and they work 6 days a week, and they go to church on Sunday. And now, the example I use today is the Hondurans. On September 8th, they're taking away their temporary protective status. People have been here for 25 years, working, paying taxes. Their kids went to school with my kids. And now they're saying you got to leave the country on September 8th to go back to a country you don't even know. And, they want to separate these families. I had 2 guys today that spoke. One guy has 2 businesses, 2 food businesses. He has 20 employees, and they want to get rid of him. Another guy's got a restaurant. He's got 10 employees. They want to, his kids are about to go to college, and they want to deport him. And we see these guys, like Grace was talking about, wearing the masks and going and scaring the you-know-what out of people. And it's wrong. And so I am encouraging the president, let's negotiate a solution to this. Let's, number one, secure the border, because what he's done is by what's called executive order. It has to be done by legislation to make it permanent. So let's secure the border. We agree the border should be secure. Number two, let's fix the broken asylum people that are trying to game the system. It's why the system was so overwhelmed, because people were abusing the system. But number three, if you've been living in the United States of America for more than 10 years and you've been working and you pay your back taxes, or if you've been paying your taxes, and if you've been otherwise following the rules, you may not have all the proper documentation, but you've been here for at least 10 years following the rules. Let's figure out a way not to get citizenship, but at least to have work authorization so you can pay the taxes and you don't break up all these families in the process. So we don't want people jumping ahead in line. We don't want people getting ahead of other people. But we've got to try and, I mean, I've met with some Korean businesses, for example. They want to try and get more visas to bring Korean-speaking people to America to work in their businesses, but they can't get the visas. Let's fix the border, let's fix the broken asylum system, and let's give people a chance for legal immigration and legal work that treats them like human beings in the process. And so what we're starting to see now is it was a good idea that started, let's secure the border, but now it's being very callously applied and ripping families apart, and a lot of otherwise innocent people are getting caught up in the middle of this, and that's not right. So let's get back to our basic values. Let's build a coalition of business, badges, law enforcement, and the Bible, where we say, this is good for the economy, this is good for law enforcement, and this is good that we treat people like our fellow neighbors and like human beings. And together we can solve this, but it requires people to use their heads and be smart and work together and stop all this yelling and screaming.
The next question comes from the YWCA of Queens on the topic of education. So this is also a two-parter, the first one about after schools and the second about ESLs. So the question about the after school programs, the question is, why was the after school program funding cut? And how many children and families will be affected? Were alternative funding sources or partnerships considered? How will children still access safe educational after-school environments? Is there a plan or timeline to restore funding? And the second part or question has to do with the ESL programs. How will the ESL funding cut affect immigrant communities that rely on these classes for language access and integration? Was there any community consultation before the decision? What message does this send to immigrant families? And are there public data or reports justifying this cut?
I think many of you have known me for a long time. I don't like to be political. I don't like to just point fingers and not provide answers. I don't say that everything is the Republican or the other party person's fault. But this is an example where I will put blame where it deserves to lay, because there was no consultation. And not only that, as Congressman Suozzi mentioned before, when we pass laws to allocate these grants, it's not just a decision that one of us makes and an organization or New York State gets money. These are laws that are put together by both Republican and Democratic members of Congress. It's a compromise that we make for these funds. And for the president to just in one full sweep, cancel these grants, that's not legal, actually. So no, there was no consultation, not even consultation with the people like me and Tom who actually wrote the bill. So it is outrageous. And if you're talking about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, these programs are not wasteful. They are not, fraudulent. And so as soon as we heard about these cuts, Tom and I, as with other members of Congress as well, we wrote a letter to the Department of Education saying, all of that, and to ask the Education Department to please release I think it was $6 billion of funding for grants that help so many of our communities, including, the ones that the programs that you mentioned before. And so, we will keep working on this, but actually there have been lawsuits, and I want to thank our own Attorney General, Tish James, who joined other attorney generals in other states in literally suing the president on this freeze. And because of your advocacy, many of you reached out, and because of the lawsuit, the education department announced just last week, I think, that they would unfreeze this funding. So as Tom said, you have to keep speaking out. We're asking a lot of our constituents and our families, we know, but that's an example of how it has helped and it is working.
And so the work that you're doing is really important. You should turn the volume up so Grace can hear people applaud for her after she speaks. She never gets to hear the applause. They're clapping for you, but they have it on mute, so you're not hearing it, Grace.
It's okay, you can have it.
So, this administration does not believe in providing funding for people who don't speak English well to learn how to speak English. They believe that that's DEI, they call it, diversity, equity. So they don't believe that there should be money provided for education to teach people who English is not their primary language. So they want to cut that funding. And, for all these different things you've talked about today, say, what's Congress going to do about this? What's Congress going to do about that? There's three things you can do. One is legislation. The problem is, right now, we're in the minority. So we have to convince Republicans to join with us, and we do sometimes. Sometimes we're successful. But we have to find Republicans to join with the Democrats to help us to pass legislation that hurts the folks in our districts. But, quite frankly, Grace and I have a lot more people that don't have English as their primary language in our district than a lot of Republicans do. And this is an important program to us, and it may not be as important to them. So legislation is one thing you can do. The second thing you can do is litigation. And as Grace pointed out earlier, Congresswoman Meng pointed out earlier, there's over 200 lawsuits against this administration saying you're not following the rules. Now, there's always lawsuits against the president and the executive branch. There's never been this many lawsuits because they're doing so many things that just do not seem to be legal. And this is an example of that. And third, so legislation, litigation, and then mobilization. That's what you've been doing. That's what we need more people to do, where you get out and you advocate and you say, we want this, we need this, we don't like what you're doing. It's so important that the people are involved. If you leave it up to just the politicians and the political parties, then the political parties are just going to look out for the political parties. And that's one of the things that's killing our country. We need the people involved in our democracy. And the fact that you are thoughtful, educated, especially as demonstrated by your questions, and paying attention to these issues is very important. It's the only way that makes our country and our democracy work. So again, I applaud you for doing that. And yes, the money's been restored recently, but they're going to try and do it again in the next budget.
For the final questions in the booklet before we move on to submitted questions, we'll do a bit of a lightning round, right? So summarized for these last four, the first question here, I guess maybe in like one or two sentences. And when it comes to the drastic cuts proposed to Medicaid, food aid, Small Business Administration, Korean American seniors and small business owners in your district stand to lose vital support, what policies are you advocating for to offset these impacts and ensure our community doesn't fall through the cracks?
This is exactly why we had a roundtable just the other day locally in part of my district with Senator Liu with some of the organizations. And I want to thank groups like KCS for participating. And they told the most important thing we can do is to tell the public right now what the impact will be. And I also want to remind people, even though the bill has already been signed into law, people should let their Congress members know how they feel. If your Congress member voted against this disastrous bill, like me and Tom did, you should call our office and maybe you don't have to thank us, but let us know how you feel. And if your Congress member voted for the big, beautiful or ugly bill, you should also let them know how you feel and how it could hurt your family.
Yeah, and so a lot of people are going to be cut off of Medicaid, and they're going to be cut off because they didn't fill out the paperwork properly. So we're going to work to try and help people to fill out the proper paperwork. As far as the foods that they're cutting from some of our kids and from our seniors, you know, that's just going to be bad. We're going to have to figure out how to find places to make it up through the state, but it's going to hurt a lot of very vulnerable people. It's really a bad policy. And as far as like Small Business Administration, I just met with the Small Business Administration to work with them to try and provide some answers to some of the tougher questions that we get in our casework. But we just got to keep on working hard on all this stuff and try and educate people as to what's going on. And the most important thing is we need to win so that we can, I mean, these are bad this does not make sense that we are cutting these vital programs in order to pay for tax breaks for some of the wealthiest people in the country. I'm all for tax breaks for lower income people, middle income people, people in the middle class, people aspiring to the middle class. But wealthy people don't need a tax break right now. They're doing fine. The stock market's been booming for the past 5 years. They don't need another tax break. And while they're doing this, tax breaks for the wealthiest people, cutting programs for some of the lowest income people, they're doing this and blowing the biggest, I'm not making this up, this is the biggest deficit in the history of the country. Doesn't make any sense. So we have a lot of work to do to keep educating people.
The next question in this lightning round is, we're talking about immigration, just circling back on it. And, you know, a lot of the community in this area, we really rely on immigrant labor, especially in caregiving, small business, and food service sectors. You know, and this is true for where a lot of Korean communities are very active. So how can our representatives help to mitigate the limitations that the new fiscal budget would impose?
I wanted to, this is related, add something about legislation that we're working on, which would allow food stamps to also buy hot foods. We feel like this is something that would be helpful to many of our small business owners in the Korean American community, and something that just makes sense. The Republicans have supported this in sporadic areas around the country. And so that's something that we're working on, which will allow more people to get more options for food. For caregiving, I think that this is an area that is especially pertinent to our Asian American community. People are not necessarily just taking care of their kids. They may be taking care of their mom or dad or an aunt or someone in their family. We need more support and more legislative ideas. And a lot of us in the Democratic caucus are working on this area as well.
So we did a press conference today, I told you, on temporary protective status. And one of the people that was there was from a home health care service. And she said they have 2,000 employees. And if there are 2,000 employees that take care of mainly senior citizens or disabled people, you know, home health care, of their 2,000 employees, 40% are temporary protective status recipients. Means that they're here legally, they have a work permit, but now this administration wants to cut their status and send them back to where they came from, even though they've been here for over 25 years. It's just nonsensical. So, you know, I think that this administration is going to have a problem as time goes on, because the biggest concern the American people have is the cost of living. And three things that are happening right now are going to cause costs to go up or stay up instead of going down. Because we all want to see the costs go down. That's one of the things the president campaigned on. But costs are going to go up from, number one, if you deport all these immigrants, there's going to be wage pressure that's going to cause wage inflation. If you keep on putting tariffs on everybody, including from South Korea, one of our greatest allies, you're going to cause the cost to go up. And number three, if you keep the deficits high, then you're never going to get a cut in the interest rate, because that would cause inflation. So these three policies of deporting some of our most essential workers, of doing tariffs, and of keeping the deficits high, which will cause interest rates to stay high instead of getting cut, that's all going to cause inflation. That will not be popular. Now, the president said the other day, well, there are some good people that have been here for more than 10 years, and they're working in agriculture and hospitality. He should know in hospitality, because he's hired people his whole life at his resorts and his hotels that are undocumented or are people that are immigrants. And he knows that, he says they're good people, they work hard, but they may not have all the right documentation. We have to use some common sense. So I'm leaning into that and saying, Mr. President, come on, let's work together. Let's make a deal on immigration to secure the border, I said, fix asylum, and to treat people like human beings and to improve legal immigration in America. And so hopefully we can make a deal to get it done. We can use some common sense to actually solve some of these problems. But it's a big battle. It's very tough in this media environment, but we're going to keep on pushing, and we appreciate having smart people like you pay attention to important issues like this. So thank you again.
I know we're running short on time, so we'll do one of these lightning questions and then one of the submitted questions that we've curated before. So this next one, I think you've touched upon it a little bit in a previous answer, but this is more towards preserving diversity, inclusion, equity, all that stuff in a lot of in the workforce. It's definitely important, especially if you need support for language access, cultural competency in healthcare and education, immigrant-specific services. It makes it harder for Korean American community-based organizations to receive funding and support for essential services when we lay out the reasons why we need the funding. If there are cuts for those very reasons. This is, for a lot of us, it seems unsustainable. So can we rely on you to protect those types of initiatives and community organizations such as our own?
Yeah, of course. That's why we're here. And I really take offense when people criticize DEI. It's become a term that is, kind of a taboo term. But like Congressman Suozzi said, we all come from immigrant families. Regardless of if you just came here last week or if your family's been here for 3 generations. And I will say that even though federal funding that's temporarily hopefully been lost can't be replaced by private dollars, we also need to have conversations. And we are, I'm the chair of the Asian caucus, which Congressman Suozzi is also a member of. And we're having conversations with private partners from corporations, firms to foundations. Many of them are scared to invest in DEI programs. But we want to remind them that even if you don't call it DEI because you're nervous to use those words, you still have to invest in our communities, and you still have to help us expand our pipeline of talent. And I actually think of this as something that can be positive because let's face it, a lot of people, organizations who had Heritage Month programs, DEI programs, it was kind of superficial, right? Like they serve some kimbap, they have someone come in dressed in a hanbok, and it's a DEI, right? But how do you really help our young people with professional development? How are you really helping our senior citizens beyond just one party a year? How are you helping the employees in your firm get that professional development and training? We can do better and we can do more, and let's use this as an opportunity.
So, Grace and I both have a lot of people that voted for President Trump and voted for us. Okay, there's a lot of people like that. They voted for President Trump and they voted for us. In my district, actually, President Trump won by 19,000 votes. And I won by 11,000 votes. So for me to win, because not everybody who votes for president votes for Congress, for me to win, at least 20,000 people who voted for Donald Trump also voted for Tom Suozzi. So why did that happen? Well, it's because I work hard to make sure that I'm listening to the people that I represent. And a lot of people voted for President Trump because of their concern that the Democrats are not focused enough on the issues they care about. What do they care about? They care about the economy and affordability, immigration, taxes, crime, and healthcare. And I'm focused on those issues, and I think Grace is focused on those issues. But they're concerned that the Democratic Party is not focused enough on those issues. And so we have to make sure that we're fighting for the issues that people care about. But recognize that when you hear attacks on DEI, which is what this administration has been doing, saying how awful DEI is, that has a very negative impact on the Korean American community. as well as the Asian and South Asian community, as well as the African American and Latino community. It has a lot of impact. And so we have to balance our need to, keep our country strong, keep our economic engine going, but also make sure we include people that have not been here for multiple generations and are not part of the existing ruling class. So we have to work at that constantly to try and balance those two needs. Grace and I will always fight to make sure that this community is included and succeeds. Now, fortunately, the Korean Americans have some of the most educated, successful people in our country. If you look at the rate of education, the rate of success, it's higher than America overall. But there are still people in great need within the Korean American community that need the help of these important programs. So we're going to keep on fighting for those programs and make sure that people are represented.
All right, and so for sake of time, this will be the final question, and I think it's very fitting. We have a lot of direct services organizations that are represented here today, and this question really leads to that. This is brought from a community member. Her name is Guyan Lee. And so the question goes, my Congress members have urged the IRS to investigate the Bronx Defenders, the New York Immigration Coalition, Make the Road, and New York Lawyers for the Public Interest that serve immigrant communities. So the question therein is, how will you be advocating with your fellow electeds to protect groups and groups like them?
We have been in conversations with many, if not all of the organizations that have been investigated. This partly falls under the jurisdiction of my appropriations subcommittee as well. And so I just want to encourage, if organizations have been contacted, they all have lawyers as far as I know. But they should feel free to reach out to our office as well. A lot of our nonprofit organizations, like the ones you mentioned, are literally on the front lines when immigrants are being approached or are literally scared to leave their homes. They are working closely with these organizations who are providing the social network and the legal support that they often need as well. They should feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, and I work with a lot of those groups. I just had I told you before, a press conference today about the issue of temporary protective status, and the New York Immigration Coalition was present at the press conference, as well as the Day Laborer Advocacy Organization and other organizations, TPS Coalition, as well as other groups. And I'm gonna, those are essential, important groups fighting to advocate for people the same as you're advocating for people. So we need organizations like that, and we need to fight for them whenever possible. So we're going to keep on doing that. I was actually the man of the year, the person of the year by the New York Immigration Coalition a couple of years ago.
Thank you so much.